I guess if I have to correct Craig, I'll have to correct the whole script. So good morning. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me over to this nice little group which we have. Thanks, Craig, for considering me. Before I might forget it in the end, so I thought, yeah, thank you so much. Yes, Greg and I were neighbors. He's one of my first neighbors in Bangalore. I have, before this, I was in Delhi before coming to Bangalore, but then that was 13 years ago. 2010, I came to Bangalore. I left my job with Birla Sun Life Mutual Fund, which was my last paid job, if I may call it. And yeah, I was the head of client relations for North India. As I moved into, so why I left, yes. So for almost 10 years before that, I had a longing to be, somewhere in the mission field. And there was nothing very serious, official, formal, lay in the Catholic Church. At least I didn't know, and definitely not in Delhi. So I kept on moving with my job, with my career, and by God's grace did reasonably well. And somewhere around 2007-8, I found this missionary organization called ICP Mission, Institute for World Evangelization, which is a Catholic organization with lay, with pontifical right. So I was looking for some place which is like formally approved by church, right? Not just like any other group which is somewhere working in the corner of a city. So Fritz Mascarenhas, if you know him, he is the founder of India Mission. He's not the founder of ICP per se worldwide, but he has been with the mission for almost more than 35 years now, which was started back in the 80s. So yes, I have 5 children. All of them are from the same wife, and she is. We live on Brigade Road. We have moved out of Rest House Road about 7-8 years ago. We live in communities. ICP Mission. We live in communities. So we sort of closed down or partially closed down a Bangalore mission, and we went to Mysore in 2016, where I was with them for 3 years. Then I came back. When I came back, I realized I could do a bit more with myself, not just being a full-time a community member of a missionary organization. So that's why I thought of pursuing some studies. Welcome, ma'am. I was just going to say, just men doesn't look nice. There's always this, what do you call this, glass ceiling in the corporate world, and are we doing the same thing to our ministry also? No.
Now we have a nice looking.
Yes. Yes. So when I came back to Bangalore, children were not very settled in Mysore with the schooling and all. So when I came back to Mysore, so that's why we decided to come back to Bangalore. And when I came back to Bangalore, I realized I could do a bit more, and I enrolled myself for a full-time course with Christ University and did MSc in psychology, so that I can do a bit of counseling on the side professionally. So yeah, I finished that. So I sat with children half my age in that MSc classroom and finished 2 years with them, and by God's grace did reasonably well there also. Yeah, so that's just about it. And not going on, 5 children and that's it. Yeah. Yes, 5 children, 3 daughters and 2 sons. My eldest child is 17, going to be 18, and youngest one is 7. So yes, I get a bit emotional when I talk about them, because one thing they keep saying, children will fly away, children will fly away. So when my eldest daughter was just 6, I used to say, don't grow up, just stay like this, don't grow up, stay like this. And she is now going to be 18. So I tell my youngest child also, don't grow up. And she said, no, I'm not growing up, I'm not leaving you anywhere. But we know that's impossible. So yes, being the salt of the earth, at our workplaces, how do we go about it? Obviously, we know this verse very well. I'll just get on with it straight away. Matthew 5:13. I won't be using a lot of scriptures, at least not quoting them per se, but there are quite a few smattered around my talk. And as I can see, I'm very old-fashioned. Still use notebooks to prepare my talks. So 5:13. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltness be restored? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trodden underfoot by men. So this is a very well-known, very popular verse, and I think by and large all of us know what it means. Salt. Salt has many properties. What could be those properties? I'm sure.
It's a flavoring agent.
Okay, that's great. Yes.
Preservative.
Yes, yes. What else?
For purity.
Okay, okay. Yeah.
Taste.
Yeah, taste, flavor. Yes, yes.
It brings out the taste of whatever you're eating. It sort of amplifies that.
Yes.
Should have the right amount. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, right amount. Very, very
It
important
was
word.
used in medical use also, disinfection or something.
Yes, quite a bit actually. Yes,
Yes, for cleansing, vegetables, cleansing.
yes. So, salt has innumerable uses, and as we go along, pretty much what you have mentioned will come also. But one of the properties of salt is sodium chloride. I'm not a science student. I left science after 10th standard, but I realized this in the course of preparing for this talk, that sodium chloride doesn't lose its taste. It doesn't lose. So when the scripture says,
So scripture says it. This passage says
yes, so when the scripture says this, that when salt loses, if salt loses its taste, what does it mean actually? For that we have to go a step forward. This verse comes at 5:13, Matthew 5:13, but it comes at the end of Beatitudes. Blessed are those, blessed are blah, 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 all those things, all those verses, very powerful verses, which is addressed to the disciples. At 5:2, it's down, when he sat down with his disciples came to him, and he opened his mouth and taught them. So he is teaching to his disciples right now. Disciples who are already following him, who already know him, and he knows them. So that relationship has already reached that phase. It's not to those who are lost forever or those who are still on the fence. He is talking to his disciples, people who are already following him. And this salt thing, he is calling them. You are supposed to be the salt of the earth. So everything which I share with you right now, going forward for the next half an hour or 40 minutes, whatever, is for disciples. And for sure all of you are, because nobody comes to a prayer meeting on a Saturday morning at 7:45. So I am sure that level of commitment you have already reached. I have never heard of a meeting at 8 a.m. in the morning. I have never heard. And when Greg called me, I told him that's the only day I get to sleep in, Saturday morning, because no school. That's the only day where I can. Sunday again mass is there and all that. Monday to Friday is school, so you have to wake up early before children. So hats off to you guys coming early in the morning on a Saturday. So disciples you are, yes. Or at least trying to be good disciples. All of us are on the same page there. Now, when he says it doesn't lose, so what he is trying to say is a disciple cannot backtrack. Once he is disciple, he is there. He can't lose his taste. He may go astray maybe sometimes. All of us do, and all of us have lived long enough to have experienced that backtracking, sidetracking. But once a disciple, always a disciple. I may feel that I have lost my taste, but no, because salt cannot lose its taste. So it's somewhere there. It's somewhere there. Now, the properties of salt. Like I said, flavor is there, preservatives, and we will come to that. Some very basic, even before that, there is some very basic properties of salt. Property means characteristics, you may say. Salt is very ordinary. Ordinary. It's not like gold or silver, which we spoke about of this session, right? Not expensive. And salt is all over. It's everywhere. In the last 24 hours, all of us must have come across, encountered or touched by salt in some way or the other. Even if you were fasting, we would have sweated a bit, which sheds out some salt. So salt is in touch with us. We are in touch with salt all the time, practically. And that is the kind of element Jesus is associating us with. He's calling us the salt. Ordinary and all pervasive, everywhere. That's how we are supposed to be. That we don't necessarily have to be very special, highly talented, and you can see it from the kind of men he chose as apostles. Very simple, ordinary people who went on to change the world in his name. So that's how the disciples, apostles are supposed to be. And we, in this context, a work setting, that's our role going to be. When we go to our workplaces, wherever businesses we are running or offices we are going to, that's how. First, scientific property, if I may call, but also spiritual property. Flavor. A flavor, when present, nobody notices it. When present in right quantities, as Joachim said. But when absent, everybody notices it. So that's the beauty of salt. And when I put ourselves in that context, myself in that context, me being the salt of my team in my office, that's a big thing. People may not give me that importance, may not look up to me as a leader or a talented, a highly intelligent guy who's contributing to the team. I may look ordinary, but when I'm missing, my absence will be felt by them. So that's me as the salt, disciple. And one example we can, in works, from a purely work setting context, there's one verse, Colossians 4:6, very, very beautiful, And I think all of us need that when we are out there working, because sometimes our workplaces can be tricky places, and if we are not careful, and this is one of the signs of a good salted or salty disciple. Colossians 4:6. Conduct yourselves wisely toward outsiders, making the most of time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer everyone. So as we are working, we interact with so many people, and most of them are living in India, most of them would be non-Christians. How important it becomes as flavor of that environment, of that team, to choose our words wisely. Because words are powerful, right? All of us we know that also. I don't want to go into that. And words can change lives. Not just change lives of our people who work for us or who are reporting to us, but also people who we are reporting to. The people who we are reporting to may look at us as ordinary, but if we choose our words wisely, that can go a long way in becoming that Christ in workplace. And it's a big deal nowadays. Unfortunately, not a lot of young people are there. All of your seasoned, experienced people. But youngsters, not all, but you can see that, how to communicate in a workplace, that requires a bit of training. How to communicate with peers and with seniors. It requires a bit of training, and that requires a bit of wisdom. Because these can be like highly politicized places, workplaces, boardrooms, very, very tricky places. The last place I worked in was like there was a landmine everywhere, so to speak. It was a minefield. Yeah, thank you for that. It was a minefield, and it took me a while to settle into that place where I could, trod carefully and at the same while I protect my team, I protect myself and I move forward. So, do people miss my work when I'm not there? So, flavor is about that. Ordinarily, if like salt, being salt, such an ordinary ingredient to food, when it's there, we don't say, nice, salt is good. We hardly say that, because we just consume it. We just go about having our food. But when salt is not there, or salt is too much, perhaps if we are too overbearing with our colleagues, you're talking about it. So just in the right, we should be mixed in our environment in the right proportion, being involved, but not too involved, that we forget our calling. Being disengaged at times, but not become so distant that we are called aloof or too proud or arrogant also, because my ways are different. I'm a Christian, I'm a practicing Christian, so we have to just blend in, at the same time not lose our distinctiveness. So as disciples, we always keep ourselves differentiated, at the same time being available to everyone, to all, and being all to all, like Paul says, right? Preservatives, again, a very common property, right, which mentioned. So salt was, back in the days also, even now as we cook, we may marinate and all, we use salt. Back in the day, salt was very, very popularly used as preservative, because they didn't have modern preservatives, thankfully, at that time. So naturally they had salt, and salt was a very expensive commodity back then. They used to rub in salt on non-veg fish, meat, to preserve it for a few more days extra. It was so expensive that salt was also at times paid as salary to the Roman soldiers. So when Jesus speaks this, we can imagine the context around him, the environment. Roman occupation of Judea, there are Romans interacting with them all the time, and Romans sometimes are being paid in salt as their salary. And that's the etymology of the word salary, the origin, S-A-L-A-R-Y, salt, S-A-L-T. So the word salary comes from somewhere from salt, because salt was sometimes, not always, paid as salary also. So it was a very expensive commodity at that time. So people could accept that as salary. Imagine that nowadays, when we are talking about stock options and all, give you half a kg or 500 kgs of salt, it won't work, right? It's become like the cheapest commodity. It's the cheapest commodity, food commodity, right? Anyone can afford salt, anyone. So that's how salt has become. But even if that has become, we don't become cheap. We may be available, but we haven't become cheap just because we are still salt, because our flavor, our preservative content remains the same. Now, after every property, I'll try to see how we can apply that property in our workplace. So preservative. Disciples, as we are called, to preserve what? To preserve what? Preserve the goodness of humanity, preserve the goodness of our workplaces. As I said just a while ago, workplaces can be very toxic, increasingly so, highly stressful places. And as a Christian worker in my workplace, whether I'm a manager or a junior level employee, it doesn't matter. That's one good thing about Christian discipleship at workplace. A Christian at workplace, it doesn't matter what position I am at. It can be highly senior, I may be the business owner, or it could be just I'm an entry level person. The work remains the same, of being Christ to all, being Christ. and ensuring that I am there for all. So, preserving the goodness, preserving good relationships within the office. That's also something which we are missing. It's becoming so work-like, so business-like. It's hard to, I don't know, see, I might be a bit dated because I have left the corporate world 13 years ago. But back in the days when I was working, since people are people, you always find some friends at workplace, but a whole lot of them are not your friends. You're not able to get along, or for whatever reason. There are cliques always. So I believe people being people, it might still be the case. Although now a lot of them are working online, so they don't even get to interact with each other offline. So back in the days, yeah, we had some good friendships, some very good friendships, which helped us to cope with the things which is going around us. So those friendships, when I'm looking at from a missionary perspective, it has to be the boundary of those those friendships have to be wider. The boundary of my circle can be wider, because the desire, the intention has to reach out, has to be to reach out to the last person who is there alone, not just to people I like and who are like me and I like them. Preservative, again, to prevent, like we use salt to prevent the fish or the meat to get corrupted, prevent it from getting corrupted. Preserve our office workspace from getting corrupted, because the world will live and live out and work out in its own way. That's how it is supposed to be. We can't expect everyone to be holy and everyone to be Christ-like. Obviously not. Forget about non-Christians, even Christians we can't expect, because they all come from different backgrounds. So there's always going to be this interaction between Christ-like nature and non-Christ-like nature, which leads to other habits or the way we interact, the way we perform, the way we put out ourselves. There's always going to be this conflict, and how we manage as mature Christians will lead us to a better understanding, perhaps even preventing that corruption from happening. Because there will be, corporates are working on a different level, in a worldly level. There the real God is money, and they all work towards how to maximize profits, which is in a way correct, because what else do they come for? But the cost of, in the bargain, a lot of it might get lost, a lot of the humanity might get lost, and that's where we can come into play. And we don't lose our humanity, and we don't lose the Christ-like nature which we are supposed to have and which we are supposed to radiate, so that others are at comfort. Now, preservative or flavor, these are common things, but there are a couple of things which salt does, which perhaps we haven't. It's not common. Let's say it's not common. Some of you may know. To use salt as an offering of sacrifice. Again, when we keep it in context, Jesus is saying this to his people 2000 years ago, and he's talking obviously to Jews, predominantly to Jews, but even to non-Jews. So when he is talking about offering, they pick it up. They pick it up much better than we are, because right now salt is no longer as expensive. Salt is no longer, perhaps even we use artificial flavors also. So maybe we may find it difficult, or we may not comprehend it fully, but the guys who were around him picked it up, because he was using his day-to-day life, right? The day-to-day life of a normal Jew. So as an offering, now offering is a very common practice for Jews at that time, right? And since they were good Jews who were very, not like good Catholics nowadays who don't know scriptures, but good Jews who knew their history very well. So when he is talking about salt, they know their Leviticus very well. 2:13, which says, You shall season all your grain offerings with salt. You shall not let the salt of the covenant with God be missing from your grain offering. So salt is mentioned here also. And the good Jews who he is talking to, they know their scripture very well. They would have picked it up immediately. So salt is not just for flavor, just for preservatives. Every aspect of an offering is a very big aspect of a Jew, and for us Christians also. We offer our lives only as a living sacrifice, and that whole thing needs to be seasoned with salt. The covenant with God, salt is there also, and covenant, as you know, is also a very big thing for God and His people, right? In the Old Testament, and it gets even more beautiful and deeper in the New Testament. So, as we live out this life of professionals, this whole office life has to be offered up to the Lord. Because that offering then can get blessed, and then that blessing will come not just for you but also for our colleagues and our co-workers. Offering not just our blessings, but also not just our grain, so to speak, but also our suffering. And workplaces are a decent source of suffering for all of us at some point or the other. At some point, I can give you my example, because what's the point of preaching without examples? The last job, and perhaps maybe a decade before, when I was starting off in the mutual fund industry, not easy. When you are kind of sufferings which perhaps all of us must have gone through at some point in some degree, being overlooked for promotion, being overlooked for a good bonus perhaps. My colleague got stock options, I did not get, or I did not get as many. And the response I give to those kind of experiences, negative experiences, can define my life as a Christian in my workplace. I remember one time, 2002 must be, I was working with HDFC Mutual Fund. I must have been a senior executive at that time. The vice president comes from Bombay. This is all in Delhi. All my corporate life was in Delhi. And he had come just before appraisals, and appraisals were happening, and we were supposed to soon get our envelopes with our appraisal letters, etc., etc. So I was due for promotion. I had already worked in HDFC for I think must have been 1.5 to 2 years. So ordinarily a decent promotion was due. That's what I thought, that working hard will get me there. But our friend talks to my boss and he leaves, and then my boss tells me this, not this time, Anil. You know what he said? The boss, the big boss, the vice president who came, what does Anil do? He just sits there and works only. And I was like, what else am I supposed to do in the office? I was young, so now that I have lived a bit more, 20 years down the line, I know he was not completely incorrect, because at a workplace you should not only be working, and I was only working, in that sense. So you have to develop relationships, and have developed that side of a personality also, which I had not developed at that time. So partially he was correct, but then to deny me a whole promotion and I have to wait for 1 more year, that was painful. That was painful, and I was in my mid-20s. I must be 24, 25. Yeah, 20 years ago means 27 actually. So very painful. But inadvertently, I didn't know this at that time, of course, but I was in the Lord. My first experience, deep experience in the Lord must have come around late 90s. Don't want to go there right now. But yeah, so I was already walking with the Lord for 5-6 years. So all I said was a little prayer. Lord, I do not know what to do now. If this is what I get to hear, he's only working, then what else do I need to do? And I left it. I did not complain, I do not grumble. I just continued with my work. Over the years, that boss and later on my other boss also perhaps, I learnt along the way that, okay, I need to do a bit more than work also, without losing on my principles. Funny story, later on, I guess in HDFC only, yes, we went to Goa for an off-site, you know how off-sites are, all these fun events, and we had this beach football. So I was like, okay, I need to do a bit more than working now, so I like football also, so I played football, and CEO, MD is on the other side, other team. He just retired a couple of years ago, Milind Barve. And I scored a goal and my team won. And I came back to Delhi and told my boss, I played with the CEO, now how is it going? I'm doing some things other than working also. Okay, good, you played football. What did you do, sir? Oh, I scored a goal and my team won. And Milind's team lost? What are you doing? See, you beat CEO in a game of football, you think he will ever forget that? And I should have maybe, let him dribble past me and let him score the goal. And boss, you know how these things work, And, boss, you're a great football player, although you must be the worst football player. You play well, you're almost like Messi, Football should be a second career. So it was like fun, of course. He was jokingly saying that, that you beat the CEO in a game of football. So I started doing these little things which were okay for me, like football and all. So yes, but offering our offering our sufferings, very important. The times we are rejected, the times we are not recognized, which will happen. The times we just fail, even as business owners perhaps, we may just not succeed. At times things just don't work, which may be beyond my abilities. It may be not because of my fault. It just happens. Sometimes things just don't work. What do I do then as a Christian, as a disciple, as a salt? What do I bring out to my environment? How do I project myself? Because it's very important. I tell you, after I grew up, there were many youngsters or even colleagues who would say, Anil, how do you manage to be like cool in this toxicity? And I cannot definitely tell it's because of my nature, my inherent nature. It has to be the Lord and Lord alone, His presence in my life and the way I responded to His call. It has to be that. And the grace that I received to respond to His call. Because naturally we are all self-centered, we tend towards self-preservation, we want the good for us, and then we think of others. These are all natural inclinations, even I have. But somehow I never came to a place where, I just had to tell my boss that I'm leaving, I hate this place or this. I never had to do that. And when I finally left HDFC and I had become an assistant manager then, and then they offered this position of head of client relations for North India. I moved on. My boss was absolutely okay with it. He was not toxic. He just let me go peacefully, because we had built a relationship over the last 3-4 years. Because I was working with GiiC India Mutual Fund 23 years ago. That was a Swiss company which had come, and it was acquired by HDFC Mutual Fund. And another example of suffering. 1.5 years into GiiC India Mutual Fund, this is my boss. Beautiful place. We lose our jobs overnight. In a way, overnight. One fine day we come and we are told that GiiC is going to sell its. GiiC is a very big insurance, for you all know, right? Swiss. And India Mutual Fund was a very small business for GiiC worldwide. So there were some floods in Europe and they had losses. To cut the losses, they sold this business. Small business, fledgling mutual fund business. wrong decision, I would say, 20 years down the line when mutual fund industry is like booming and they were already making profits within 2 years of operation, 2 or 3 years of, so I think they lost out on India market, still not in. Anyway, so we are told that business will be closed and we are looking for a investor, acquirer who will buy us out. And HDFC happened, and when HDFC happened, we all were given nice compensation, for the time, almost like 2 years salary, which is even now companies don't. Infosys, Meta, they don't give. They're 3 months, 4 months. That's what they give. But we all got nice compensation. Only those who were not acquired by HDFC. The ones who got jobs, they got jobs with HDFC. How many people got jobs? Initially only 3 across the country. So these people got acquired. Was I one of them? No. But 1 month later, after I've got my compensation, HDFC calls me. So I get 2 years package and I get a job. Within 1 year, within 1 month of losing my job. Only God can do that. Rightly said, ma'am. So these things are happening rampantly now. These layoffs are very much more common. People are just laying off just to, companies are just laying off just to cut costs. That's all. Not because of anything else. Just to cut costs for 6 months. Then they will hire again. So it's like an in thing now. Getting laid off is not like a big deal anymore for companies. And very soon even employees will start getting used to it, and because they will get jobs here and there and jumping from one company to the other. But it's leading to a lot of anxiety. Now that I'm a counselor and I take sessions professionally, the immense pressure which young employees are going through because of this, this sword of, what do you call this?
Democracies.
Sorry?
Sword of democracies.
The sword of attrition. She's giving me right words.
You welcome the that's experience talking.
Is over our necks, their necks all the time, and how do I? It's very anxious. These clients, when I deal with them, when I talk to them, they're very anxious, and for me to reach out to them in a Christian way is difficult because a lot of them are non-Christians, So to tell them, Lord will do it to them straight away, it may not work. Professionally, sometimes, because I cannot bring my faith deliberately, but I subtly bring in because that's me. I cannot change my nature. So it's going to be when I take sessions, when I counsel them, it is not easy. People are very, very anxious about future. Very, very anxious about future because it's like hanging over their heads all the time. So I give them this example. It will work out. For me, it worked out so beautifully, because the 3 people who had got the jobs did not get that package, which I got. So I got like the best of both worlds. So that's how our Lord works, When that is happening, we don't know why that is happening. And this is the time when I was about to get married. So I lose my job. By this time, my alliance is already fixed. And my mother-in-law starts praying, now what to do now? To dump him also, as a future son-in-law because he's jobless. So she starts, I'm praying for you that you get a job. I'm praying for you that you get a job, But somehow, honestly speaking, I was much more relaxed than even at times I think now I am with these kind of challenges. I somehow knew that things will work out. So I had just begun to enjoy my 2 months package when they called me, and just begun to look out for a job when they called me. And it worked out well. And I worked there for another 2-3 years before I moved on. So offer these sufferings. We need to, because there is enough and more of suffering in our professional workplaces. 4th property, destruction, salt. Destructive powers. And you won't believe that there are many more verses in the scripture using salt as a as a as a as something which destroys. Many more verses. I have written quite a few here. Judges 9:45, Psalms 107:34, Genesis 19:26 says, Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt. Moses' warning, their land shall be burnt out with brimstone and salt. Jesus himself says in Mark 9:45, everyone will be salted with fire. So this how do then salt, the apostle or the disciple rather, the Christian who is following the Lord in workplace, where does this destructive nature come from? How does it work out? It corrodes, yes, but what am I supposed to do? It's like a negative quality which I am supposed to have. How? Destroy what?
Destroy bad practices.
Destroy bad practices. Need to take a stand against sinful ways in our workplace. Ethics, morals. Very important. Not by being preachy. The preachy thing, of course, we cannot do. We all know. We can't preach in workplace. Although back in the days, I mean, I never preached, but there was this friend of mine. She's still a good friend of mine. We are like 20. We must have joined the mutual fund industry together. She has more experience than me, although she's younger than me. I used to tried to talk life into her, It never worked really hard because she has gone astray completely. But she's still my friend. Every time I go to Delhi, we meet. But I used to really talk to her whenever she would never like it, but she would never let go of me as a friend also. There was another boy also, so we were like a trio, and we used to hang out a lot. Both of them non-Christians. So our duty is to try to make an attempt to destroy, to corrode the corrosiveness in our workplace without losing relationships. Challenge, but not impossible. Injustice or discrimination which might be happening. Again, a personal experience. This is when I was with Birla Sun Life, and there was this interpersonal issue going at one of our branches. I think it was in Kota. Kota is in Rajasthan. Yeah, Kota, small places. These are like small. North India. We had 32 branches in North India, and all the client relations team used to report to me in Delhi from all these small locations. So typically, small locations are like what? They are like one branch in charge who may not be manager level but branch in charge, and one client relations person who will be junior to him. More than half of them were girls. Now, a situation erupted there, wherein the girl complained to me that she was being harassed by the branch in charge. And I was, along with the HR manager for North, I was on that investigating team to investigate the situation, because it was like he said, she said kind of a situation. So when we investigated that, we realized that there was a genuine case of harassment going on. Since a small town, they had this girl was a bit outspoken. That's all. Not exactly doing anything wrong, but she was outspoken, which in a typical North India setting, in a small town setting, can be taken as aggression, unfortunately, even now, right? So that was the problem with branch in charge was having with her, that she was speaking too much, which was put up as if she was immoral. So what was coming to North India and then onward to Bombay was this information or misinformation that she was not of right morals. She is having friends in the office and she is talking like this. And so when we spoke at length to both, we realized that's not the case. So there I had to take a stand because this was clearly a discrimination. I had to take a stand against this branch in charge. Again, not easy because branch in charge is directly related to report to sales heads, of North and then onward to Bombay. So sales heads always have if something is said about their flunkies down the line, they always have a problem. But I had to take a stand because this was not just about a girl, but it was also about a culture being created within the environment. Now, I was not a very senior person, I was just a middle level manager. But wherever I could, whatever I could, I had to do. And I put my foot down that this behavior from the branch in charge should not continue. It stopped immediately, but obviously people are people, his nature was like that. He did something again, but this time it backfired on him, and after 6 months he was fired. So we have to take such stands. That counter-cultural stand as Christians we have to take. It's difficult, it's going to be painful, it may have ramifications, but then our Lord himself had to take that stand against sin, and he had to lose his life for that. But then life came after his death. So that's the same thing which we have to follow as we are following the Lord in our workplace. There's going to be suffering, there's going to be crucifixion, but there is resurrection after crucifixion. The last property which I would like, and with this I will finish, is salt as a fertilizer. Salt as a fertilizer. Now again, in Jesus' times, salt was used as a fertilizer, sometimes to retain water, sometimes to kill weeds, to protect crops. The same thing applies to us also as a disciple. We use ourselves to again eliminate weeds. It's a bit like destroying, but it's also like we ensure that the plants which come up, which could be our young team members, it could be perhaps even new policies which are getting formed, and with those policies which may not even be ethical in all ways, or maybe not just to all employees. If I as a manager don't speak out, or even as an employee, if I don't speak out, I may be heard, I may not be heard, that's beyond me. But that speaking out and speaking up, being that fertilizer which kills weeds, which preserves the soil around you, is our job. The end result is the Lord's. Is the Lord's. We can never decide the end result. We can neither decide the end result because that's the Lord's, nor can we guess the end result. At all times during these interactions that we have, the actions that we take as Christian disciples, wisdom is very, very important. Godly wisdom. Because one wrong word, and job's gone. Extremely important thing. Godly wisdom, to stay calm and to discern when to speak also. Not just what to speak, but when to speak. Because there is a time and place for everything, as the Bible says. If we don't hold ourselves back when we need to, and we blurt out something, maybe even the right thing at the wrong time, it can have a negative impact. I've given you some experiences from my corporate life, which I may be, building myself up, but I could not do it all the time. So to close this small talk, this short talk up, I'll share a negative experience, a mistake, an error, which sort of bothered me for many years later on, which I could not. A similar issue cropped up, just like the other one, in another branch. Again, a conflict between my team member and the branch in charge there. And there, the evidence which we collected, on paper at least, was against my team member. And because the evidence said so, I just went by the book and I had to let her go. But after we let her go, and both me and my HR counterpart, we were not very comfortable letting her go because we knew there was a lot of backstory happening. You know, a lot of in the background there was a lot had happened in that branch, and that branch had history. But we didn't have evidence we didn't have evidence to protect her. We had evidence only to indict her, if I may use the word, and we had to let her go. But after we let her go, we realized, although deep in our spirit we knew, deep in my spirit I knew that she is not that bad as the man is trying to project. The issue was of data stealing data from the systems, because you steal data from investor data and you can sell it to distributors who can then approach them and all those, which wasn't the case actually. I think she gave data of a distributor to that distributor only, but perhaps she downloaded it in the wrong way, which looked as stealing. But she had to go, so we let her go. But we knew, and we realized it later, that she was set up. She was set up by a sales guy who made the distributor ask for that data. So that's one place where a few events where I realized that I was not up to mark. And I want to close with this experience because I want you to feel encouraged by your own mistakes if you may have done in past, you may do in future. Because it's not possible to be a perfect Christian all the time, all the places. Those judgment calls can go wrong at workplaces because these are highly stressed environments, and we are just flesh and blood, right? We are bound to do these mistakes every now and then. But the way out is, which I did not have at that time, to quickly realize that, recognize that, perhaps make amends if possible, and then move on. Like any mistake by us. As a Christian, we keep making, we confess, we move on. We confess, we move on. We try to resolve that we won't do it again, and we move. Not to live in guilt. Oh, I could have done that. I could have done that too. Perhaps, I could have studied better in my organizational exam, or, for a promotion or whatever. I could have treated that junior better. So these mistakes are also common. And we are going to do that mistake if we haven't done. But I'm sure all of us have done something or the other at our workplaces which we feel bad about now. But let's continue to be examples, to be the light in our workplace. And I'll close with a small example. Again, probably I'm gloating about myself too much, but I'm just saying how this can be a really, a fruitful experience. When we live in a way, people notice. And I talk about my female friend, so we used to, and this male friend, we used to go out on Friday sometimes because we had long days. So on Saturday weekends are off, so we used to go out. They used to drink. I don't drink, so I could drive them back to their metro station, or that's not the only reason they used to take me, but we used to really have fun, three of us together. So she got married. When she got married, after some time she came and told me, I can't come like this. My husband doesn't like this. What happened? So she said, my husband is okay with me going with you, but he's not okay with me going with Vishal coming. He says, that Anil is a saint, but Vishal, not so much. Obviously I'm not a saint, and all of us know that none of us are saints, but he was comfortable enough to let his wife go out with me, but not with wife, because my reputation was like this, and I kept away from certain things when I was there. Drinking is not something morally wrong. But if as a Christian I can't hold up one drink, then we have to be careful, right? Because once we had a few drinks go down, if we become a new person, then we have to be careful. Then we have to be careful. So I don't morally judge people who drink because it's not my job anyway, and it's not like something evil. But yes, a person should know how much he can hold. And these office parties are, these are famous stories. All of us have seen that. I don't want to go there. How just people drink and then they're a new creation altogether, right? And they say the kind of things which they should not have said. They do kind of things which they should not have done. Too much. So be careful with the kind of things which we do when we are in a office setting. With that, I come to an end. Thank you very much.